All right, good morning, NCC. How's everybody doing today? Excellent, excellent. I feel the energy and I feel the love of the Lord in this morning. Worship was incredible this morning, wasn't it already? Ooh, man, get a little excited about that. Great job, team. Hey, it almost feels like we have a little bit of a family reunion going on today. We got our family and the friends from the South Campus joining us. It was a pleasure over here at the North Campus. Can we get some love to everybody? Y'all are incredible. Thank y'all for being flexible and coming over here. We saved you a seat, so you just found your seats. Good job. Well, what I want to do as well is I also want to welcome all of those that are joining us online, as well as all of our family over at Upshur County Jail. Come on, North and South Campus. Let's show them how much we love them. And we also have a team that's currently in Israel right now. Pastor Steve and about 20 other folks are there, being able to see what the Lord has actually done and be in the same footsteps as Christ and the other disciples. And I'm giddy and excited to see all the cool things and the good understandings, the new ideas that Pastor Stephen and the team has when they come back. It's almost like we get to live vicariously through the things that Pastor Stephen and his team are bringing back. So it's just exciting. Well, I had the opportunity to open the summer series at NCC, and now I get the opportunity to close that. And the next week, Pastor Stephen is starting a new series, which is just going to be jam-packed and awesome. But as I was praying and going through prepping for this particular message, I felt like the Lord was leading me in a particular direction with something that was really pretty fascinating for me. I do kind of nerd out. I know I've said that before, but this is one of the things that tied my nerdisms, if you will, to something that I think was incredibly powerful for what was to come. And so as I was going through, I felt like the Lord was leading me to teach and talk about this passage. And if you were with me today, if you have your Bibles, or you can join us with the YouVersion Bible app, if you wouldn't mind turning or scrolling over to James 1, 2 through 4. It says, "Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you'll be perfect and complete, needing nothing." This particular passage came to my mind almost, 10 to 12 years ago now. And it was a part of a story that I got to read that coupled with some research I did when I was in college. I studied biology and chemistry, and so I really got into the workings of the natural world, which is just fascinating for me. And so one of the things I want to share with you is this incredible story that occurred in the late 90s, early 2000s in the southwest of Texas. So how many of y'all, this is the big state of Texas, we had the stars at night are big and bright, deep in the heart. My people, I see. Okay, good. How many of y'all have been outside and you've seen the bright stars in the big Texas sky and you've wondered, I wonder what's out there? I wonder if there's other things or beings or life. Scripture talks about there being other sheep in different pastures. I wonder if there are things out there, intelligent things. Well, these guys who are scientists had the exact same idea. And if there are people out there or things out there, I wonder if we could actually live out there as well. So what they wanted to do is they wanted to create what's called a biosphere, which essentially you take a fish tank, turn it upside down, and put it in a desert, put some plants inside of it. They wanted to create this biosphere in the southwest desert, make it great, make it perfect, and use it as a tool and a launching platform to be able to establish a colony on Mars. I mean, wouldn't that be wild, wicked? So the idea was they brought all the scientists. So they got some biologists, some incredibly talented biologists, some botanists, guys who know plants, some chemists. They got all the ists that they could find. Everybody that knew anything about anything, they brought them into a big conference, and they started asking the questions. This is the goal. We want to create a copy-paste version of what we can do on Earth and put it on Mars. How do we do that? So the guys came together and they put all their genius minds together. They started working on all the intricate details. Okay, let's look about how much sunlight we need for the plants to grow. Let's look at the amount of soil, the soil composition, the nutrients, the minerals, all the little details so that the plants themselves could take the right amount of nutrients, the right amount of moisture, grow strong, produce fruit, produce crops so that the people that were living inside of this biosphere could then take the food and live sustainably. It's essentially a small Earth inside of this bubble. So they even went down to the minuscule details. Let's look at the bacteria. Let's look at the small organisms that break down the leaves and create nutrients for plants to be able to regenerate. It was a perfect environment on paper. And so what they started to do is they said, okay, we got it. We got it all squared away. Let's figure out how to do this. So they put it into action. Perfect environment on paper. Several months later, they ran into a big problem. The plants weren't producing fruit. They weren't producing crops. And so all the ists came together again. And so they started asking the question, well, biologists, what happened? Did you not get the right strain of trees to be able to grow the right fruit? No. The mineral composition in the soil was perfect. We have enough sunlight coming through, enough waters being in there, perfect barometric pressure, all the way down to the microscopic details. But they missed one thing. One thing. Does anybody know what that one thing was? Wind. In a biosphere, there's no wind. In here, there's no wind. We may have the breeze that's blowing from us from the AC, but in a biosphere, there's no wind. See, the interesting thing is scientists came together, and after they figured this out, they realized that in this perfect environment, they missed one of the crucial elements that helps the plants to grow strong. And the interesting part is as plants are in the natural environment, wind comes along, rustles the bushes, pushes against the trees, and what it does is that wind stimulates the trees to create multiple types of cells. And those cells go from being very simple and small organisms and helps the plant grow to its full maturity, thus being able to bear fruit. But without the wind, the trees and the plants would never grow to the full maturity that they needed to produce fruit that other people depended upon. And when I came to this realization, it blew my mind. And I'm like, oh my goodness, if this is what's happening in our natural world, and these are what scientists who aren't necessarily believers have found, I wonder if we can draw the same conclusions and apply this to our spiritual life. And so I started reading initially in Psalms 19:1. It says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky proclaims his handiwork. And so me, and again in my nerdisms, had a little fun for a while. So I decided to do a little bit of digging and went back to the science. Not what we learned or what we actually discovered, but how did we come to know these things? It's called epistemology. How do we come to see and understand and discover the discoveries? What filters did we use? What were the methods? That's a structural thing. I'm a structural process guy. So what lenses did they look through to come to these incredible discoveries? And how can I put myself in the same situation as these great minds of history? And the interesting thing is that I found is many of the great minds of history, the fathers of our science, believe that evidence found in nature could actually tell us more about God. That seems contrary to what our current culture says. But the scientific revolution of the 1500s to 1700s was predicated on the idea that men could learn about nature because of the incredible aspects and characteristics of an all-powerful, eternal, timeless, spaceless being who had a will and a purpose for things. And it was all held together by his laws. And this wonder actually led us to God instead of away from him. And that gave credibility to his nature, again, being all-powerful, all-knowing, timeless, spaceless, and has a will. You know, this is an incredible thing. I wish I could get into it more, but I just don't have the time on a Sunday, so I'd encourage you, go check these guys out. Read what Johannes Kepler, the great German mathematician, said about about the Bible. People like Galileo, Copernicus, all these guys understood that there was a greater being out there whose will imposed what he wanted into the world, which led us to these incredible discoveries. One of the guys that we know here in the U.S. fairly quickly is Sir Isaac Newton, the guy who discovered gravity. He said this most beautiful system of the sun, planets, and comets could only proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being. It was an incredible idea. And so he came up with these incredible discoveries, or stumbled upon them in some cases, because he had a preconceived understanding of where everything came from. But I get you. I see some eyes glazing over. That's perfectly fine. You could say, hey, Ethan, I'm not a scientist. I went through school. I don't want to go back into school. Totally understand. Do you. That's fine. That's fine. You know, this stuff can be boring and irrelevant at times, but in all reality, Jesus spoke in the same way. He spoke in parables. Now, parables are one of those where you actually take something that's common that we all know about and you take a deeper dive into it. And in fact, Jesus actually spoke in over 50 parables in the Gospels over a vast majority of topics that most people understood. You know, things like farming, planting, marriage, taxes, weddings, all these things we know about intrinsically that are part of our common experience. But what Christ did is he encouraged the people to see what he's talking about, hear it, take a deeper dive, but think about things maybe a little bit differently. Think about it through a different lens. And the interesting thing is we know most of these things. We don't have to go in and actually put a fine scientific point to it. We know that 5K that some people have signed up for, me, that haven't started training very well for it, you don't get faster if you sit on the couch. We know this. You get a little bit slower, and it takes more work as you get closer. We know that if you take a cast iron pan and you put it outside in the rain, what does it do? Rusts. We know this. I don't have to tell you that's part of the second law of thermodynamics, where a law of entropy, where things of high order, high energy go to low order, extreme chaos. I don't have to tell you that. We know that intrinsically, right? But science, in the original idea, helped us to put a finer term and a finer point on things that we intrinsically knew about. The odd thing is coming to these revelations, I find contradictions. And see, the odd thing is that many of us hold contradictions in our own mind as it relates to our spiritual life. See, we know that if we sit on the couch for our 5K, that you're not actually getting faster or stronger or quicker. Actually, you're getting weaker. We know that if you're not actually spending time in a relationship, that your relationship drifts apart. We know that if you put the rusty knife outside, or the knife outside, it starts to rust and get dull. We know that your car doesn't get more valuable the more miles you put on it, unless it's, a 1964 and a half Mustang, something like that. Then it starts to get a little more valuable. But we know these things, but for some reason, we have a contradictory understanding of our spiritual life. We unfortunately have this false pretense that if you follow Christ, your life will be peaches and cream, sunshine and daisies, and that life is supposed to be easy. Who said that? Jesus didn't say that. He didn't say that at all. In fact, this is what he said in John 15:18. He says, if the world hates you, remember that it hated me first. He even goes further on in John 16:33 and says, I have told you all this so that you may have peace in me. Here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart, because I have overcome the world. And even one of the greatest forces for the first century church, Paul, who endured so much, stonings, beatings, almost dying and being resurrected and going back into the city to preach again, said this in the book of Acts chapter 14, verse 22. He said, where they strengthened the believers, they encouraged them to continue in faith, reminding them that we must suffer many hardships to enter the kingdom of God. Honestly, I think it's because Paul knew that trials produce fruit. Keep in mind, I didn't say good fruit. It produces fruit. Paul also talks about in Romans 5:3-5, he says, we can rejoice too when we run into problems and trials, for we know that they help us develop endurance. And endurance develops strength of character, and character strengthens our confident hope of salvation. And this hope will not lead to disappointment, for we know how dearly God loves us because he has given us the Holy Spirit to fill our hearts with his love. But sometimes we go through pretty tough times. And some of you may justifiably and very easily say, brother, you don't know what I'm going through. I'm always stressed. There's always something going on. Well, okay. Let's take a pause from that. Let's evaluate that for just a second. I think at times we get stress and pressure confused when they're two completely different things. Stress is one of those that is pressure. It's a type of pressure that we see in life, but it has no goal, no outlet, and is actually harmful. We know that more stress in your life actually causes internal issues, heart failure, additional graying, if you will. But the opposite to that is pressure. Pressure is a good thing. Pressure is stress with the goal or a purpose, and it's helpful, but I want to put this point out, but with limits. I want to give you this example that Pastor Steve and I were able to work together and figure out. Think of a bridge, right? A bridge spans a gap. And what's the bridge's whole design? To be able to handle a certain amount of pressure to help people get from one side to the other. So pressure is good, but too much pressure on that bridge causes what? Stress cracks, stress fractures. The foundation starts to break apart. And it's when this stress starts to create these fractures that it then becomes dangerous. So when we think about pressure and the storms of life, how can we have joy? We think about stress and pressure and how somebody happy and joyful in this time, and it honestly doesn't make a lot of logical sense, and I think it's because we think that joy is typically based on our surroundings, and yeah, of course it's easy to have joy and sunshine when everything's going your way and, man, you just bebopping right along. Isn't that easy to have a smile on your face when you got the pay raise you want, your kids are happy, your wife loves you, you're doing a great job at church, the Lord is meeting all your needs? Isn't that easy to be happy and cheerful? But what about when things start falling apart? What about when you lose someone? What about when car breaks down or we lose power at the South Campus? Joy is one of those that is a choice, and it is not brought on or deterred by your surroundings. And it's not affected by our natural environment. It is not natural. It is supernatural. And it's funny how it's called the fruit of the Spirit, because it is a supernatural fruit brought on by something that's beyond our current circumstances. But some of you can even say this, and I think I've said this before in my own life, but I can't make it on my own. There's too much going on. I can't handle this pressure, this stress. Of course, you're not designed to. It's probably one of the hardest lessons for me to learn in life at a young age. So when you think you're supposed to handle it all on your own, you realize that you can't, that you're not even designed to originally. And honestly, if you could handle it on your own, if you could do everything that you needed to be able to save yourself, why did Jesus die? Why did he come in the first place? If you're good enough to handle it on your own, where does God come in? So often we go through struggles and trials complaining about how bad life is when God has blessed us with so much, but yet we choose to focus on the negative aspects of life, what we don't have or what we should have got, instead of really seeing what God wants for us. And we miss completely what God is really trying to do for us. One of the things I want y'all to remember, and this is something that the Lord showed me, is the trials of life are for your benefit. They're not for your detriment. They're there to help you. And just like we talked about in the Earth 2 story, without the wind, the plants would never mature enough, grow tall enough, or stand strong enough to be able to produce good fruit. The storms of life are going to produce some type of fruit. We intrinsically are like sponges. Whenever we're squeezed or pressure is put on us, what is inside will come out. So if you have malice and bitterness and frustration inside and pressure is put on you, what's going to come out? Malice, bitterness, frustration. Scripture talks about there, no good fruit comes from a bad tree, and no bad fruit comes from a good tree. Good trees produce good fruit. Bad trees produce bad fruit. So as we're going through the storms of life, over the years, these are a few things I feel like the team and the Lord has showed me. So I just want to give you all some practical things to be able to help you during the storms and the trials of your life that we inevitably have or will go through. One of the first things I feel like the Lord showed me years ago was to change your perspective, to actually embrace the journey. Paul, again, who was beaten, chastised, and thrown in jail multiple times for being able to preach the good news of the gospel, wrote this in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 8. He said, 3 different times I begged the Lord to take it away. Each time he said, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. So now I am glad to boast about my weakness, for the power of Christ can work through me. That's why I take pleasure in my weaknesses and in the insults and in the hardships and in the persecutions and in the trouble I suffer for Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong. And if we consider ourselves as the source of hope for all the strength that we need, I'm sorry, family, but you will fail. We must remember that the grace of God is sufficient for all the things that we go through in life, because it is in our weakness that Christ's strength is made perfect. I want to tell you about a friend of mine. He actually goes to this church. He's a big, buff, beautiful man, as his wife would describe. His name's Mike. The first time I met Mike was a few years ago. Pastor Brad, who's one of our South Campus associate pastors, was leading a men's group at Panera Bread, and so we were all meeting at 6 a.m., and 6 a.m. is different for certain people. Sometimes you get up in the morning and it's, they bound in, they're happy, and other people are still trying to get that diesel engine warmed up for the day. So the coffee's not quite hitting just yet. So we're sitting there, and there's a mix of all of us just kind of figure out what we're supposed to do. And in comes this new guy I've never met before in my life, never seen him at church. And he comes in, he's just bouncing, just bebopping down the street. And I'm like, 6 o'clock in the morning, here he comes, just wide awake, full of the joy of the Lord. And I'm like, okay, I can dig it. And he sits right in front of me. And so we had the opportunity to be able to have a really great discussion that day, got to know Mike right in front of me. And when he left that day, I stayed back with Pastor Brad and chatted for a few minutes. I said, I don't know much about Mike. I just met him, but I like him. I can get to know this guy. He's going to be good. I like him. And so Brad felt the same. Pastor Brad felt the same way. But if you look at Mike, Mike's one of those guys who's at their front door. He is a great connector. He actually just joined our WAVE team to help people articulate and feel comfortable before they get baptized. He's a great guy, full of joy. But ask Mike what his life was like 5 to 6 years ago. 5 to 6 years ago, Mike lost both his wife and his son in a tragic drunk driving accident. It wasn't his fault. And in the same accident, Mike was thrown into a several-week-long coma. And in this coma, they honestly didn't think that he was going to recover. The doctors thought that he was going to be a vegetable for his entire life. And he was in his coma. They had his wife and son's funeral, so he never got to go. But in this coma, that the doctors honestly thought they'd have to reteach him how to eat, how to walk, how to do every basic thing that we take for granted. He felt the Lord come to him during this time and gave him a choice. You can either choose one way, the bitterness, the frustration, the malice, the anger that so many of us could easily justify. This drunk driver came and took his wife and newborn son away. Or you could choose life. And you could glorify God in the trials and the suffering. And Mike, even though he didn't grow up in a family that encouraged him to have a relationship with Christ, he felt the Lord in his hospital, and he chose life. And so what Mike did is he pursued and he glorified God in every aspect of his suffering and in his recovery, so much so that he actually fully recovered faster than the doctors with a lot more progress and at a greater distance than they really ever thought. He said it was a literal miracle that this happened to him. And it eventually came to the point, after Mike was further along in his recovery, he was at the courthouse with the man who accidentally took his family away from him. And he came down off of that witness stand, walked right over to the man, and in that man's broken state, picked him up and hugged him and forgave him. I don't know how you can do that in your own strength. I'm breaking apart just thinking about it. Yeah, Mike has gone through some incredible things, some extremely tragic things that many of us would have chosen to give up on. But you know, the thing is, Mike embraced that journey. And he chose to glorify God in his suffering and to choose life and to choose joy. And the beautiful thing is Mike just joined our men's leadership group that we're actually going to be launching our men's ministry this fall. And so what he's doing is he's utilizing the things that have happened in his past for the benefit of other people. And so Mike, now he's remarried, has 2 beautiful kids. He's serving. He's got a great job, back to work after 5 years of not being able to go. The things are working out for Mike. Isn't that incredible? I'm so excited. And I get a lot of satisfaction from seeing what God does in other people's lives. So if that's Mike's story, and God is no respecter of persons, what can he do for you? And taking an example from Mike is a great example of this. To their second point, it's focus on helping other people. If you want to get through the storms in life, get out of your own head and try and help other people. Book of Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 through 5 says, don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourself. And don't look not only to your own interest, but take an interest in others too. And you must have the same attitude that Jesus Christ had. So you got me asking that question. What attitude did Christ have? So if we were to flip over to John 19. It says, standing near the cross were Jesus' mother and his mother's sister Mary and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother standing there beside the disciple whom he loved, John, he said to her, dear woman, here is your son. And he said to this disciple, here is your mother. And from then on, this disciple took her into his home. Family, Jesus said this while he was hanging on the cross. After he had endured and was still enduring the most tragic and incredibly anguishful torture that man had ever devised up to that point. He had been beaten, his skin and his flesh literally ripped from his body, a crown of thorns shoved into his head, and he was nailed on a cross to suffocate until he died. And in that moment, he still chose to look down from the cross at his mother, who in that case, in that particular environment, would have been a widow, and widows are considered almost second-class citizens. They're considered a burden. And in that state where his body is completely destroyed, he still looked to the benefit and the care of other people. And he found a way to be able to give some sort of family dynamic back to his mother with a son that could care for her. And this is how you can help other people and have that same mindset of Christ, the same attitude. You can get involved in a serve team. We have so many serve team opportunities here. This is an opportunity for you to get outside of your head, get around people who are similar, who have the same mission and the same goal in life. And that's to help other people grow in their relationship and their understanding of God, and help everyone to grow in the same mission that we all have, which is to further the kingdom. You can also get involved in mentoring opportunities. Our women's ministry has a great women's ministry or mentoring opportunity. And this is where you utilize the things that you have gone through for the benefit of other people and help them get through their difficult situation, their difficult times. You can take the ashes from your past and turn those into the beauty of tomorrow. Lastly, if you're going through something now, if you're going through a trial or a struggle, find someone who's going through the same thing, because the lie of the enemy will tell you this: you're the only one going through it. That no one will understand the way that you feel. That if you were to go to talk to somebody, they'll reject you and kick you out. That you'll be by yourself for the rest of your days. That is a lie. I'm here to tell you that is a lie from the enemy. Do not believe that. The Word of God speaks differently than that. So you have the opportunity to be able to find those people in this body that are going through the same thing that you are, and walk beside each other. Ecclesiastes 4:9, this isn't in your notes, but I wanted to share this with you. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 9 says, 2 people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. Likewise, 2 people lying close together can keep each other warm. But how can one be warm alone? A person standing alone can be attacked and defeated, but 2 can stand back to back and conquer. And that 3 are even better, for a triple braided cord is not easily broken. And so in the trials and in the things that we suffer, the most impactful thing that I can encourage you to do today is our third point, and that's to keep your eyes on Jesus. If you go back up to James chapter 1, verses 12, it says that God blesses those who patiently endure testing and temptation. Afterwards, they will receive the crown of life that God has promised those who love him. And the interesting part is the word endure in this particular passage is different than what I think our Western understanding of endure is. If we were to go into the Greek where it says hypomeno, and this particular word means to not escape or find a way to ease the discomfort or get out quickly. It actually means to willfully submit and stay underneath. Coincidentally, it's actually the exact same stylization that's used in Hebrews 12:2. When it says, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, for the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Family, Jesus didn't slip away. In his trials and his struggle and his body being broken, he didn't choose to come off of the cross any faster than God already had planned for him. And honestly, as a matter of fact, while he was on the cross, people mocked him, made fun of him, challenged him to call himself down. If we jump over to Matthew 27:40, it says, and saying, these are the people mocking Jesus. You are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days? Save yourself. Come down from the cross if you are the Son of God. And in the same way, the chief priests, who were his relatives, the Jewish people of the day, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders mocked him, saying, he saved others, he said, but he can't save himself. He's the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe him. He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now if he wants him, for he said, I am the Son of God. But Jesus, in all of his power, being fully God and fully man, willfully chose to endure the cross, not escaping it or coming out of it faster than needed to be, for you and I. He didn't reject it. He didn't reject the thing that was before him that gave us the opportunity to be reconciled to the Father. He willfully chose and submitted to the will of his heavenly Father so that you and I could be justified in front of God. And the thing that I was reminded of as I was going over this is he was fully God and fully man, endowed with the fullness of the Holy Spirit. He endured. And we as believers in Christ have been given the gift of the Holy Spirit to strengthen us and to help us endure the winds and the storms of life so that through our suffering and trials that God is glorified and others are encouraged to keep going and to lean not on their own understanding but lean on God for everything, to be their full sustainer in life. So as we go through, I just want to give you all a couple little points real quick of how to actually keep your eye on Jesus. One is to get into his word. How do you know somebody if you're never around them? How do you know their characteristics or their mannerisms or what they sound like if you never hear their voice? Get in the Word. Find times to be able to strengthen that relationship. That way when you do hear the word of the Lord or when you do come into trials, because God already said that you will have trials, you already have a good relationship with God and you know how to work through. We even have the life group season that's starting up here in a few weeks. Find a book study. Be a part of the men's ministry that we're launching here in a few weeks. Be a part of something that spurs you along and spurs other people along to get into the Word and understand and see Christ in a completely new way. And the second thing is to get in his presence. And you can do that through worship and prayer. And the great thing is tomorrow we actually start our 21 days of prayer and fasting. So tomorrow morning at both campuses and online, you can meet us here at 6:30. And this is a beautiful opportunity for us to recalibrate our life to what really matters. Sometimes we get so busy in the life that just stretches us and so much stress or whatever you want to call it, that we lose focus of what actually matters in life. This is a beautiful opportunity to recalibrate and refocus on God himself, meeting you here and being your sustainer. So as we close today, I just want to leave you with this final thought. You know, so often in life, we want the prize. We want the ending result. We seek the reward, and so often we want to be glorified with Christ and elevated to the glory that God has preset for us. But so often I think that we miss, in order for us to be glorified with Christ, we must first identify with him in his suffering. It says in Romans 8:17, now if we are children, then we are heirs, heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ. If needed, we share in the sufferings, in his sufferings, in order that we may also share in his glory. You know, Paul wrote this to the early church, encouraging them to stand strong, to keep the faith in the face of their trials and their persecutions, because there is a purpose and there is a plan in your suffering, and that the trials of this life have a meaning for us, and for us to take hope in what Jesus said, John 16:32 and 33. And it says, a time is coming, and in fact has come, when you will be scattered, each to your own home, and you will leave me all alone. Yet I am not alone, for my Father is with me. And I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace, because in this world you have troubles. But here's the thing I want you to remember and to take home. But take heart, because I have overcome the world. And as we all stand together, I want to remind you of this one thing. The same Spirit that lived, that dwelt on Christ, that rested on him, who had the fullness of the gospel, the fullness of the Holy Spirit, he overcame the lies and the change of this world. And so we, who have also been gifted with the same gift, the power of the Holy Spirit, can overcome if and only if we identify not with ourselves, not with our own futile struggles, but if we identify with Christ and his sufferings, and we constantly keep our eye on him. So all of y'all, as we've gone through today, and if you've heard that incredible story of Mike and the attitude that Christ had, how many of y'all would say today that you choose life, that you choose the victory that comes from standing on what Jesus said.